So today I'm here to do a video talking about the best books I've read so far this year in terms of backlist science fiction and fantasy. I did a similar video for horror and thrillers, and that video should be out by now, so I'll have it linked down below in the cards and description. And today I want to just celebrate books that I love, but may or may not make my end of the year list depending on how the rest of my year goes. So if you enjoy this kind of content, definitely stick around, subscribe. Otherwise, let's get started. First, let's talk fantasy so that we save the best for last with my science fiction list. But in the number 5 spot for backlist fantasy, I want to talk about Weave World by Clive Barker. I have a love for horror, but this book is all fantasy. Essentially, it's a piece of portal fantasy that is very complex. The title really says it all, that it's a story that is woven together. There are a lot of different threads going through the story. In this, there is this secondary world where there is magic alive, and it is woven into this rug, and the story just has many layers. It is a book, I fully admit that while I found it to be very fascinating, I enjoyed the escapism. It was also very complicated, so depending on how I feel about this book when I reread it, because I want to reread it at least once more before the end of the year, I'm going to see whether or not it goes up or down on my favorites list. But it's a book that left me just really intrigued. It's one that left me thinking about it, wondering about it. I had so many questions, and it was just a very enjoyable story. Again, even if you don't love horror, this one is safely in the fantasy zone. For an author that is known for writing a lot of horrific work, this one is very fantastical in nature and follows a lot of those tropes, and I really liked it, and I just have to decide how much I like it once I reread it. And in the number 4 spot is probably the most controversial book or series on this list, and that is the Night Angel trilogy by Brent Weeks. This is the first book, The Way of Shadows, and I have a love for Brent Weeks. I've read his Lightbringer series, and I really enjoy a lot of what he does. I love his writing, his characters. He has a great sense of humor, a lot of good witty dialogue, and this story follows a man who is trained to be an assassin. I have found that assassin fantasy is not normally my thing, but in the hands of Brent Weeks, it really did work for me. Now, I do want to acknowledge, because this book I feel like is very hit or miss with readers, where a lot of people really struggle with it. I do admit that Brent Weeks is not amazing at writing female characters. I don't go to him for his female representation. And also, I do acknowledge that this world that he is writing in is not very nice to women. There is a lot of threat of sexual assault, and I, in a strange way, enjoy seeing a complex, morally gray world like that, because I think it's honest, and I think it portrays a certain side of society that I like to see. It's very reminiscent of something like A Song of Ice and Fire, which is another world that is just very gritty. But I also understand that not everyone wants to read that. So while I respect that this series is not for everyone, it definitely was for me. I had so much fun reading this book as well as the other two in his Backlist original series, and I just binged through them. They were such page turners, engaging and exciting to read. I love the characters, their back and forth, and overall I have really good things to say about this one. I will admit the ending, the final book, is not my favorite, but I had so much fun getting there that I really can't complain. Then at number 3, we have The Emperor's Soul by Brandon Sanderson, this popular fantasy novella that follows a woman who works as a forger. She is caught in the act and then is forced to try to forge or recreate the soul of this dead emperor and bring him back to life. And we follow her. She is attempting to do this job, but she's also attempting to escape because she knows that this job is impossible. And when she fails, or even if she manages to succeed, she assumes that she'll be killed off. And so it's a really exciting story told in a very small package. I honestly think it's probably my favorite of all of his work, and I just think it's such a good way to showcase Brandon Sanderson's ability to write fascinating hard magic systems. Now, technically this is tied in with the world of Elantris, but honestly, once again, I just recommend reading this one as a standalone, even if you haven't read the novel yet, because it really is its own work. It's unrelated, and it's oh so good. I just think it's smart. I love the main character. I love the magic, and it's just got a good balance of like suspense and really interesting details. So I think it just showcases everything that, yeah, Brandon Sanderson is known for in a really great small package. Then at number 2, we have The Last Unicorn by Peter S. Beagle. And this is a beloved classic fantasy story that I'll admit I fell in love with because I already loved the animated movie. In the story, we follow a unicorn who believes that they are possibly the last unicorn, or at least they haven't seen another unicorn in a very long time. And so they go on this epic journey where they go to try to find out what happened to the other unicorns. Along the way, they meet up with a magician and other characters, and they're just this ragtag crew or group that come together on this unlikely mission, and they travel through the countryside together. This book is a lot of things that I normally don't like in fantasy. It has songs and poems, which normally drive me up the wall. It's also very classical or traditional in nature, which is normally not the thing I'm drawn to. Constantly I talk about the fact that I prefer more out of the box, unconventional, newer fantasy stories, but I do admit that I think I'm colored by the fact that I adore the movie. It was my childhood favorite, still love it today, and getting to see the original work, which is just as beautiful, really won me over. Highly recommend this one. It's a standalone. It's beautiful. If you love classic fantasy, I hope that you check this one out, because I think if I love it and I don't love classic fantasy, you're gonna love it even more if that's possible. Highly recommend. And at the #1 spot, we have The Trader Baru Cormorant by Seth Dickinson, which is the first book in a quartet that is yet to be completed. I've read the first 3 books and absolutely love them. This is probably my favorite, but I do enjoy the other 2 as well. And in the story, it's told in a secondary world with little to no magic. We follow a woman who, as a child, her nation was taken over by another entity, and not only did they physically take them over, but they stripped them of their cultural values. They forbid them from having polyamorous relationships and gay relationships and a lot of things that were very much part of their culture. And she sees her whole family being torn apart because of this. And so as she grows up, she forms a plan to get revenge. She decides to become an accountant within the nation that has taken her over and decides to take them down from the inside. This is a book that is gritty and dark and unflinching. The main character is not likable. She makes some really terrible choices in order to progress her own desire for revenge. I think it's one of the best revenge stories I personally read. I love the world. I found it to be fascinating. And as someone who really enjoys economics and commerce, I really enjoyed the fact that you get a lot of that detail. Not everyone is going to love that. If you don't have a love for those aspects, you might find those parts dry. I soaked them in. I thought they were fascinating and love this story. I can't wait to see how it all finishes up in the last book whenever it gets published. Now let's switch over to science fiction and talk about the 5 best backlist books I've read so far this year. Technically I've got 6, and that's because at the #5 spot I have 2 books, both by the same author. I have Rendezvous with Rama, as well as 2001: A Space Odyssey, both by Arthur C. Clarke. And these books I just had to put in the same spot because my feelings towards them are very similar. Both are space adventures that are very classic in nature, and they are page turners. They're short. They deal with some really cool ideas, and I had so much fun reading both of them. I really don't have a favorite between the 2. If you do, I would love to hear your opinion down below. Which book do you think is better than the other? In my mind, they're just neck and neck for enjoyment. But I'll be honest, I don't know if these books are going to make my end of the year list, depending on what else I read, because while I had so much fun reading them, they also didn't leave the most memorable impression on me in terms of making me see the world differently or changing my world views or having an aha moment when reading them. It never really happened. But if you're looking for just a fun sci-fi adventure story, these are great to check out. And definitely if you're looking to get into classics and looking for something very accessible, these are great because while they deal with scientific ideas, they are really easy to understand. They move very quickly with short chapters, easy to follow, and we're very, again, fun is the word I want to use. But will they make my favorites at the end of the year? I'll be honest, I'm not sure. We'll find out together. Then at #4, we have The Trouble with Lichen by John Wyndham. This is a book I recently reviewed, so I'll try to keep it short. But in this story, we follow 2 scientists that discover that they have found this rare lichen that has the ability to extend people's lives. And then they have to grapple with the decision of whether or not to tell people that this exists. And even if they don't, if they should find a way to distribute it so that people can benefit from the effects. I love that this book poses questions surrounding the morality of extending life and what that really means, not just for an individual, but also for the larger society, because we as humans often are very selfish and only really think about our own lives. But when our own lives are extended, suddenly things like the length of our planet surviving suddenly becomes a lot more important. And then on top of that, we have a female character at the center of the story who really subverts a lot of the ideas surrounding a woman, especially in the 1950s. So she is not married and is not particularly interested in getting married. She also doesn't have children and isn't having a strong desire to procreate. And so I love that it challenges those long-standing beliefs and offers a strong female perspective. It feels like a book that could have been written today because of its progressive nature and just really stands the test of time. So highly recommend this one. It definitely hits on a lot of my favorite bookish buzzwords and tropes and discussions and themes that I really love to see. So hopefully go check it out as well. And then at #3, we have Journey to the Center of the Earth by Jules Verne. This is another classic science fiction story, but if you somehow do not know, this is a story that follows a professor who takes a student to go and try to find the center center of the earth. They discover some old information and takes them to Iceland and go on this epic adventure. This is what I love so much about Jules Verne, is he creates these really exciting adventure stories that just hold up on their own for being exciting. They are fast-paced and moving, but then he also introduces a lot of really interesting ideas to the reader. I find these books to be very accessible, and even though he does perhaps dump a lot of information on me as a reader, I love every moment of it. So I loved as the professor was explaining things to a student, I was lapping up all that information at the same time. And at the same time, I was excited to see what was at the center of the earth. I wanted to know, and I just had so much fun getting there. So highly recommend this one. I will admit, I don't think it's as good as 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, but if you've already read that one and are looking for more, this is definitely my next best recommendation for something similar. And then at number 2, we have The Automaton by Ian Young. And this is a sci-fi book that I feel like needs a lot more love online. This is a story that starts out at the end of humanity. So we are dying out. We know we have come to our end. And in that time, we create these automatons and these beings. And then fast forward 5,000 years, we are now following the story from the perspective of this old automaton that is waking up, and they are trying to assess and find out what is happening. They end up befriending or going along with this artificial intelligence, and together they are exploring this new world. This is a book that I loved for so many reasons. So as I've said before, this is clearly a love letter to the classics. I think if you enjoy the works of Isaac Asimov, I think that this will ring true for you as well. And at the same time, this book felt very fresh. It didn't feel like a rehash, but instead felt very unique. What I think works so well with this book is the fact that the author, clearly while having a lot of love for the older work, also writes a book that feels very modern and fits in well with the present day. So the characters are well-rounded and well-developed. You have a world building that is rich and lush, and you want, as the reader, to go along with the characters and discover what actually this future holds. And then on top of that, you have a book that moves along at a good pace. It never feels rushed, but it moves along. There's never long periods of time where the characters are just sitting around and talking. Instead, I found myself just glued to every page and wanting to know more, wanting to see what was going to come. It just, again, it felt both classic and fresh at the same time, which is such a hard balance to do. I feel like it's usually one or the other. And if you can't tell, I love this book a lot. I definitely want to reread it and see where it's going to land in my final list once it comes to the end of the year. But so far, it's at the number 2 spot, and it's going to be hard to knock it off from there. And finally, at the number 1 spot for the best science fiction book I've read so far this year in terms of Backlist is easily The Swarm. This is a piece of epic apocalyptic fiction that is told over multiple perspectives. We as the reader get to watch as people in different places on Earth are discovering that the Earth is rebelling against all the terrible things we have done to it. It's a book that deals with environmentalism and climate change, but in a way that to me didn't feel preachy. It just felt very exciting. You have this world where things are just changing in the ocean. There's a lot of unrest. Things are just happening a bit strangely, and it just seems like something more is going on, and it is slowly revealed to the reader what that is. This book, despite being incredibly long, I think this copy is over some 900 some pages or almost 800. This book was so easy to fly through. I read it in a number of days. I could not put it down. I just wanted to know what was going to happen next, and I made the comparison in my review. But yes, this author does remind me a lot of Neil Stephenson, which is a hard comparison to make because I love that author. So anyone who even comes close to him gets high marks from me. In the way he reminds me of Neil Stephenson is the fact that he writes really interesting ideas into the story. So as we're going along, the characters are explaining different ideas surrounding biology and all of these other scientific ideas that surround the story, and they are just woven into there in a way that I found absolutely fascinating. I want to know more. Despite how long this book is, there was nothing I would cut out of it. I did not mind a single section, a single paragraph. I thought everything was perfection. This book is translated, and I'm so grateful that this German book has gotten in the hands of English-speaking readers like myself. Cannot recommend this one enough. Such an underhyped gem. If you're looking for an epic science fiction book that is just going to have that wow factor, but also be grounded in a lot of great hard science, which is detailed within the book, I cannot recommend this one enough. I love it. And yes, it's at the number 1 spot. And I'm going to make a prediction and say it's going to stay here for my end of the year list. We will wait and see, but that's my guess so far because this book is perfection. So that's it for this video here. I'd love to know of the books I talked about, which ones are you planning on checking out for yourself? And I do hope you subscribe and stick around because yes, at the end of the year, I'm going to be compiling my final best of the year list. And these books may make the cut or they may not, depending on how many other great books I read before then. And just keep in mind that sometimes sometimes these books go up or down in my rankings. Sometimes I reread books, sometimes they kind of fade from my memory. But at the moment, these are my best books I've read so far this year that haven't been published in 2023. If you're looking for those videos, don't worry, they're coming soon. I'm going to tell you which new releases are worth your money and time. If you are here and still sticking around, thank you so much. Give me a thumbs up, drop a little comment, even if it's just a stack of books. And if you want to hit that little notification bell, you'll never miss a video from me. Thanks so much for watching. Talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.